It is 1:31 and call the meeting to order. And before I start, I just want to ask if there's anyone recording the meeting other than LCAT. Okay, if there's none, hearing none. Secondly, just want to state that the meeting is being held via Zoom in accordance with the governor's orders of March 16th, 2020. I would suggest at this time, although we do have to approve minutes, that we promote, well, why don't we just get through the minutes and then we can just go. Unfortunately, Tom was not able to, he's having computer problems, and we don't have the 429 minutes, but we do have enough people here to vote on the, well, do we have enough people here to vote on the 422 minutes?
We have four of us.
All right, so can I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the 422-21 meeting?
So move.
All right, and do I hear a second? Yes, second?
I'll second.
All right, thank
By
you.
necessity.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? I will do roll call. Kathy?
I have to abstain. I was absent.
All right, Chris?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
And Jim? Yes. So I believe we have enough to move it.
Okay.
So the 422 meetings are, minutes are approved. We'll defer review and approval of the 429 until next week. So that concludes at least the business portion. What I'd like to do is promote the representatives from the school committee and school administration to join us. Greg, Gordon, welcome.
Kathy, that worked.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, Pam.
Gordon, Sarah, Pam.
Okay, we just got through our business portion approving our minutes. So really the next item is our discussion with on the school budget. So number one, thank you all for joining us, and let me just do one last thing and introduce who's on the Zoom. My name is Jim Broderick. I'm chair this year of the Town Council's Financial Oversight Committee. And with us for the committee are Kathy Hill, Tom O'Connor, Chris Saulnier, Rich Fricaro, and ex officio Mary McNally and Steve Lonergan. And with us, joining us from the schools is Greg Thompson, Sarah Trulio, Gordon Smith, and Pam Blair. And thank you for taking the time to join us. It's always such a fun discussion. How can you not look forward to it, right? So I think
time of year.
I thank you for all the information that we've kind of traded and you've provided us. Obviously, we sent a few questions, but I guess I'll give you an opportunity if there's anything you want to bring up or at the outset or say, certainly you're welcome to do so.
Right. Okay.
You're on mute, Greg.
All right. We're adjusting so that we're not echoing. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our budget with all of you. We appreciate the time. I guess one of the things that would be incredibly important just to all of us to understand, and I don't know if you had a chance to go through those documents, but if you look at the ESSER 2 worksheet, you see that a lot of our, or all of our spending with these grants tend to be on elements that are going to improve the learning environment while protecting and keeping everybody safe. They're not necessarily your regular school year spending, which I think that's what they're actually intended to do. And we can go through those later. I know you also had a question around employees, and I think I sent that chart that was just a single page, if you have that. So our employees that are under the operating budget are 404.72. That's similar to what we had last year when we decided, okay, we're going to eliminate 5 positions. We do then carry in grants 3.68 teachers, and that's probably in our MECO grant, 5.70 paraprofessionals, and that would come through Title I. And then food services operates independently. They actually, in regular school years, are self-sustaining. And so, but they're still under the school department. So the full employee list, when you also add at will, and at will are literally individual contracts for that school year, and it usually is around IEP needs. So it could be a certified nursing assistant. It could be, in some cases, a registered nurse. And that will go up and down based on special education needs. So the budget that we put forth is a level services budget. It's not adding the positions that we had talked about last year and that we reduced in terms of the getting down to a number that worked last year for the budget.
So I was a little remiss because I meant to indicate or mention that, you know, obviously very challenging budgeting work to do and challenging work to do, period, in terms of educating the kids last year and projecting to do it this year. I can only say I'm glad I'm not I'm not trying to help with that, or I'm glad I didn't have to try to budget for it, because there's a lot of uncertainties as there are still in the town budget as well. But I certainly acknowledge that that's unusual and a lot of more uncertainty in figuring out just how you can make this work given the restrictions. So
Sure.
certainly
We appreciate that. I think if you were to ask our teachers, and they're probably accurate in this, having this perspective, we had 3 school years in one, because we opened with in a predominantly remote model, which was new in terms of instruction to all of our staff, and we did a lot of professional development around that. We still had about 102 at the beginning of the year of students coming in. So we had staff in and we had staff out in that predominantly remote model. Then in January, we moved into a hybrid. So we took our teachers and our paras, and all of our staff have been exceptional, built on their skills in terms of managing remote, and now they had students in front of them and students on screen. And then in April, starting April 5th, we went into full in person, and our elementary schools in many classrooms are running at about 90%, 95% fully in. So each one of those was a shift in instruction, a shift in terms of how the buildings are operating. But with that said, we also know that, say, the time frame from September to January, our regular operational spending was different. And so, you know, similar to last year, that would be something that certainly we would look at as we close out this fiscal year and turn back money to the town.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how we proceed, we do have a set of, I think, 9 questions that we had forwarded on Monday. I don't know how the committee feels about our process for the afternoon, but we could start with those and then move on from those to any questions that the committee members might have. If that's acceptable to everyone, we can start it that way. And some of these I think may already have been answered, so this could be fairly quick. So we got the slideshow. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't know where to find it, so thank you for.
Oh yeah, no worries. And if you watch the video, it's really riveting. If you just watch the video.
I caught the tail end of it.
Okay. I need some popcorn if you're watching the whole thing.
Thanks. So the second question was, what are the costs involved in assigning permanent substitute teachers, summer school and after school programs, et cetera, et cetera. We'd be interested in also the cost of contracting for counselors. And will these positions be new additions, or will they be permanent, or just a transition period only? Some of that you've put into the ESSER, your updated ESSER 2.
Right. Right.
But perhaps you can just explain it to us so we're clear.
Sure, absolutely. And I have to say, Jim, that's a sneaky question. It's kind of MCAS-like because it's number 2, but I think then you just rattled off like 6 questions. So it's complex, and so I'm going to have to go in parts.
It's kind of like a paragraph. They're kind of related, aren't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the permanent substitutes, just to give you a little bit of background and context on that, when still today, but definitely in the beginning of the school year, when you have a positive case, you have to do the contact tracing, and the quarantining was what started to move our staff out. Some cases they could work remotely, some cases, unfortunately, they weren't feeling up to it, and we were struggling to get regular daily on-call substitutes. In addition to that, we also knew when you're working with someone who's coming in daily, they may or may not know the school, but certainly in this operation, they're not going to know sort of how we're doing remote instruction, how we're doing hybrid instruction, what it looks like now in full in person. So the hope was if we offered something that was permanent, we would attract more candidates, and we did. So not all the buildings have filled fully to the level of 3, but the high school and the middle school, I think, have 3, and at least one elementary school has 3. And the cost for that, I think, was running, if we do a full year with them, which we did not do this year, but we're going to hope to do that in the grant next year, I think was somewhere around $130,000. Am I right on that, Pam?
Well, are you referring to next year?
Yeah.
So
I think
next-
you're right, Jim, you're asking about next year.
Wait, the year affecting the budget year, yes.
Right.
So 300,000.
Oh, I'm sorry, 300,000.
300,000
It's a good thing Pam is here.
for, that's 3 permanent building subs at each school. So it's a total of 15 at $110 per day times the 183 days comes out to $301,950.
And the 3 permanents are basically, they can fill in for any teacher in that school.
Right. So the idea is that if we can have them there daily, 1, we can assign them a computer. 2, we can start to train them, and then they can fill in where needed. In some cases, they're filling in, actually in one case, with the leaves of absence that we went through earlier in the year, we had a permanent sub taking over a classroom. We picked up in this hiring a few people who were in the process of getting licensed. And so some of our permanent subs are licensed teachers, which is really great. And so that we can place them now much more strategically and have faith that they have the skill sets to keep it going.
And the building principal said this has been a saving grace to them as you know, the building leader trying to keep the building going.
Questions?
Everybody can hear.
Yeah.
Pam.
I was having difficulty.
Pam, you're a little soft.
Sorry, I was just going to say that the building principals have said to us that this has been a game changer and has been a saving grace to help them, you know, get through the day, because you just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. So,
Rich?
To the superintendent, could there be a savings in this in some way? For example, if a person is out for the whole year, we're not paying them as much as we normally would pay them, correct?
Correct. It really depends, Rich, on how much sick time they have.
Right.
So if someone has gone out on a leave, and it's a medical leave that's approved, they have that, as you know, that paid leave through their sick time. Now, they may still have the medical need to be out, but once it goes unpaid, yes, then you're not paying 2 salaries, so to speak.
Okay. Thank you.
can I just add something to that? 75% of our teaching staff are at the top of the scale, meaning that they've been here for a number of years. So most of them have a good number of sick days. I just thought I would add that in there for you.
Thank you. Other questions on this? Question number 2.
Sorry, yeah, so we'll continue into question number 2. Also in the ESSER grant, but in the ESSER 1 grant, we've taken care of custodial overtime and in some cases IT overtime. And I can't say enough, not only about our ELPS staff, but the IT staff has been incredible, because for us to go predominantly remote in the month of August, they, I think, cleared something like 250 individual work order tickets, making sure that students have the Chromebooks, they have what they need. In the case of our kindergartners and our first graders, that they had the iPads and they were ready to go. And then they also worked with us early on in looking at potential challenges with internet connectivity or Wi-Fi. And so we worked first with Spectrum, and then we shifted course when it didn't look like it was going to work well with Spectrum, and we actually purchased from Verizon, or rented. I guess you never purchase these things, you just rent. Hope everybody knows you're renting your clicker if you have cable at home. So we are renting these hotspots, and we gave them to families that were having trouble connecting. So that is in the ESSER grant. We probably won't see as much overtime going into next year, but we want to be prepared in case. We also know that we're still going to need protective personal equipment, and that runs at a high cost. Just to give you an example, let me pull up, let's see here.
Are you sharing?
No, I was just going to look at a, so we were looking at weekly use of PPE supplies. So I'm just giving you a quick overview of Mountain View. So alcohol wipes, they go through 24 containers of 500 count approximately every 2 weeks. Gloves, 1 case every 2 weeks. Lysol spray, 1 case per week. Meadowbrook, they're going through 3 boxes of gloves per week. Masks, they're the throwaway masks, 1 box times 50, usually a week. Alcohol wipes, 18 tubs per week. And hand sanitizer, 4 quarts per week. The hand sanitizer just might be me visiting. I never met a bottle of hand sanitizer that I didn't like.
Hard to pass by, right?
Yeah, it is hard to pass by. Plus, it's good modeling for everybody. As you walk in a room, you hand sanitize. That's what we're teaching people. So we know we're going to have some of the PPE, continuing with the PPE, even if we have predominantly the majority of our staff vaccinated. Some of that is more emotional, so that people are feeling safe, because some of the things that we have around the district, and I'm sure other buildings have this as well, you have new plastic or PVC, is it PVC or plexiglass? Sorry, I was looking for dividers at all of our counters. Our speech pathologists have a smaller one where they can work with students. The student can see them, and they can deliver services. So there's a lot of equipment that's new. And what we wanted to make sure is that as we were bringing teachers back in, whatever they felt they needed to do that hybrid and in-person instruction, we provided. And it's a range of what people felt they needed. In some cases, our teachers originally were teaching with the mask and a full visor. In some cases, our teachers just stayed with the mask and worried about, making sure they're distancing properly. We're starting to see a shift to a little bit more of a comfort level, which is nice to see. And I think that's due to the fact that many people are now vaccinated. Working through your number 2 here. So counselors and psychologists, we have guidance counselors and some adjustment counselors in each of our buildings. And there's a difference between the training in the two. Guidance counselors generally are looking to help students work into their academics, might work with some social pieces, especially at the elementary level, such as how they integrate and discuss and meet friends at lunch, and they all do our guidance curriculum and our SEL curriculum at the elementary, where they're going into classrooms and working with teachers. However, we don't have adjustment counselors at Maple Shade and Mountain View. We do have adjustment counselors at Meadowbrook, Birchland, and the high school. Adjustment counselors are a little bit different. They have taken more courses and actually become similar to a social worker, where they can provide therapy and support to students. And so what we're hoping to do is actually with ESSER 2, if we can bring that over 2 years and possibly ESSER 3, am I right, Pam?
That's right.
We're hoping to put in place 2 more adjustment counselors, not have it hit the operational budget over those 2 years, and slowly start to work it into the operational budget, possibly through attrition. That's actually how we got our adjustment counselor 10 years ago at the high school. We had a certain amount of retirements. We were looking at what the needs were in each department, and we were able to meet the needs in each department and add an adjustment counselor, which has been really incredible. In addition to that, we partner with a group called River Valley Counseling, and it's something in the last 5 years or so that school systems have started to do. And what that means is they work with our guidance and adjustment staff, and for students who need even more support, we make a referral, and for the most part in that partnership, they are being paid through the family's insurance. However, we do have students who don't have that ability. They're not taking the insurance and so forth. And so we were looking at an estimate that, you know, we may have more students in need than River Valley can handle. For instance, Birchland has 14 students that are seeing a counselor 1 time a week from River Valley, but they also have a pipeline of roughly 7 to 10 students who right now they think should have that, but do not have it. So in looking at some of our social emotional data, we were seeing that we're averaging somewhere around 2.4, 2.5, or 2.6% of our student population getting to that level. We rounded up to 3%. And if we were to look at that and just do contracted services over 2 years, you could be in the neighborhood of somewhere around $525,000. So it gets costly very quickly. The hope would be if we have adjustment counselors in every building, and I think Mr. Thompson actually prior to this meeting was bringing this, this fact up, depending on need, you can shift those too. So if a building needed more, we might be able to shift an adjustment counselor over to that building 1 or 2 days a week to help out with that need. So we're looking to mitigate what we may have to do in contracted services, and we think the adjustment counselors would be able to do that. See if I hit all of it.
So what are you putting words in your mouth that, oh, I'm sorry, Greg, did you have?
I just want
You're muted. Don, can you yeah.
I got it. Just to further that, on those 2 positions, that's a newer discussion that we're having. Originally, we had thought that we could use contracted services, specifically coming out of COVID. You know, even in the years past, we talked social emotional, but in an effort not to add FTEs, our concern now is that everyone will be looking for services coming out of COVID, getting us all back to some more normalcy. So in order to help our students immediately to have staff members, specifically adjustment counselors, that's why that's a newer idea, those 2 adjustment counselors. That would be in addition to our level services. As Gordon alluded to, we're going to pay for those for the first 2 years, at least commit to those at an ESSER. But we believe in order to meet the needs of the students, we have to fund those positions now. And we're hoping, we're not even sure about it, but we're hoping we'll be able to find folks to fill those positions. As I said, the need will be high going forward.
So if I understand you correctly,
Not to be overly dramatic, but just to give you an example of sort of, and I think that not only the Commonwealth's in this situation, but the nation. So we have a lot of things in place, and we have staff working really well with our families and students. We also have in place, when we went one-to-one, software that tracks what students are searching. So, and we've had a few, and I think one situation where we actually thwarted a suicide. And that happened actually over vacation. So I give the middle school staff a ton of credit because they were monitoring not only their email over vacation, but caught this. They had the student already in their support system, but obviously over vacation, this student needed more support. And we're really thankful that not only do we have the staff that are attentive to this, but that software has been incredible.
So if I understand you, Gordon, that in terms of whether they're permanent or in transition, you would like them to be permanent.
Correct.
But you're hoping to fund it out of the COVID relief funds for maybe the next year or two and find a way to bring them into the budget after that. Is that
That's correct? Yeah. Our thought was that if we can keep it off the operational budget, and as we look at what staffing needs are the next 2 years, there may be situations where you have a retirement and you don't necessarily have to fill with a like position, so to speak. And that might be where now you move the adjustment counselor in.
Thank you. Any other follow-up questions from committee members regarding that? Okay. The next question is fairly perfunctory. It was just asking if you had prepared your 3/31 year-to-date financial. It might be helpful for us to see it
Sure.
if you have.
We haven't finished it yet, but it is being reported, I believe, in Monday's
Monday.
meeting.
All right.
You can
Okay.
catch us live on Facebook.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
You supply popcorn then too?
We can if you would like. We can get a popcorn maker. That
Thank
could be COVID-related operations.
Yeah, we won't meet again till the 6th, so if you have a chance, I think it would be helpful for us just to see where you are.
We'll send that along.
Question number 4 was really kind of a follow-on to 2, but in a more general sense. And just trying to understand if there were pieces of the COVID relief funds that you were able to use for or qualify some of your normal operating kind of costs and get funding through the COVID relief funds. I get the sense that isn't necessarily the case, but wanted to ask you.
Sure, and I guess a lot of it, I don't know if you were able to open the one sheeter that was about ESSER 3. So that gives you an idea of what we can use when ESSER 3 becomes available, what we can use it for, which is pretty broad. But just to give you an idea, you had similar type criteria. I think actually ESSER 3 is going to be a little bit more wide open, but you had similar type criteria for, say, ESSER 1 and the CVRF. And one of the things that we're certainly doing, it's both COVID related, but it's going to build our ability to continue to provide incredibly effective instruction, is we purchased 400 new Chromebooks. And so we're starting to replace the Chromebooks that are starting to fall off the support cliff. I think that's how Ryan describes it. And we also then renewed it was 150 or 200 teacher computers, man?
I think it was 150.
So roughly 150 teacher computers. Again, some of this was spurred on by COVID, and the grant was incredibly helpful. It was spurred on by COVID because we realized when we got to hybrid, and we're now purchasing 150 computer cameras and 150 additional monitors, that's all COVID related to manage the hybrid model. We realized that some of our older teacher laptops could not handle some of the new technology that we're trying to plug in. And so we did experience some situations in January where we had the class all of a sudden go completely dark, which then increases a lot of people's adrenaline and anxiety. But we've worked through that. And so I think those things, certainly are items that we traditionally have either in capital or in operational, probably not, to the extent of 400 Chromebooks in operational, but in capital, we have computer renewal and so forth.
So is there, go ahead, Greg. You're muted.
Yep.
Okay, here's a quick question. I'm looking at that list, Mr. Superintendent, on the ESSER 3. Can you define very briefly, what does it mean by high quality curriculum?
So I knew there was going to be one in the crowd. Nice job, Mr. Ficaro. So high quality curriculum is a term that the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education is using. And basically what it means is that they want districts to look at, as they adopt curriculum, take some time, especially with these grant funds, and make sure that you're putting in place curriculum that is evidence-based, has been researched, and is effective. And then the biggest one that DESE likes is aligned to the current standards. And so they have put out a lot of guidance documents, and they have some wonderful webinars that if you would like, I can send those to you, Mr. Ficaro, and you can watch those on how to do this. But what we really want to do there is we want to vet this, and we want to pull teachers in so that you're building understanding and ownership as you do this. So some of our grant funding will go that direction. I think first, it's probably going to look at some of the new literacy research, and then as we get new research, we usually get DESE right in behind it with some kind of mandate. And so we're looking at that, but I think we're also going to be looking at our math, because we have been piloting some different math programs at different grade levels. But in order to qualify under the grant funds, it has to meet that criteria, the evidence-based, high-quality curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just to follow up on the question that Gordon was answering in terms of the grant. So ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 are mostly expended or accounted for and listed out as we've discussed already. ESSER 3 is a large amount, certainly. And as Gordon had the yellow sheet, talks about things that we're looking forward to do with ESSER 3. It is a 2-year grant, so it gives us some flexibility in terms of when we spend the money, but we know there's going to be some great need coming out of COVID. And as you can see, the things that we list specifically are those things related to COVID and getting us back to some normalcy. What I would say about this year is there was some cost savings in the fact that we weren't all in the buildings all at the same time. Not as large as we may think, but it does exist. Also, some of the COVID money perhaps took some of the operational expenses, as Gordon alluded to as well. So I think the strategy that we'd like to use is the money turned back to the town at the end of the year. And already, Pam, we've identified about at least 200,000 that we could safely say we're anticipating returning for, if not more. So I think that would be our strategy, A, because it's a 2-year grant, and B, we'd really like to have that money to get us the services that the kids are going to need, and also to move us forward a little bit in education. It's a good shot in the arm. For East Long Meadow, it's a source of funding that normally we wouldn't get, and so let's take an opportunity to use it. And at the end, whatever isn't used, perhaps next year there will be some turnbacks out of the operational budget, and then the following year, since it is a 2-year grant.
Right. Thank you, Greg. Questions at this point?
Absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think that that's part of the challenge too, is that we're really budgeting for the unknown, and we have to really capitalize on the funds that we have available to us right now to make adjustments so that in the event we find ourselves in a similar situation at the end of those 2 years, we're prepared in a way that we weren't when the pandemic first hit. So thinking about not just the here and now and the immediacy of meeting the needs of kids come next academic year, but the forward planning to ensure that if we find ourselves in a similar situation, we have those resources, we have those materials, we have those positions in place, because the money might not be there in 3 years. So really trying to think about what can we do so that we support kids and educators right out of the gates next academic year, but also how do we put our school district in a position to really not be behind, heaven forbid, another type of situation like this arises. And to Gordon's point earlier and to Rich's question regarding, evidence-based curricula, it also really is a benefit that we have these 2 years to expend these funds, because we don't know what the data fully is yet for our students. We haven't seen MCAS data for this academic year. We didn't have it last academic year. We haven't seen end of year data from iReady this year. So we don't want to spend money on an unknown situation when it comes to student data. We want to see what the needs of our actual students are so we can best match what the purchases are to the needs of our students. So I think we are budgeting for an unknown, but I think it's a smart approach to think about how we expend those funds over the long term to meet short-term, but also long-term needs.
So Sarah, I think you're answering my question. Let me see if I understand what you're saying correctly. So there may be pieces under the ESSER grant, the ESSER 3, that we might be able to qualify some of our normal operational or capital expenditures in and squeeze it into the ESSER grant. But if I'm hearing you, you'd rather not do that because you'd rather keep that money available in the event there are other things that you don't anticipate now that you're going to have to spend. And the idea would be somehow, if you didn't have to spend that through the ESSER, would it then somehow, you wouldn't not use the full amount of the grant, but you would somehow flow it back at that point to the town? Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it, we do anticipate using a lot of it. Again, I go back to the sheet. If you look at the bottom, these are the things that we have to address. We know these things will need to be addressed, and these are what we're going to use the ESSER 3 funds for now that we've used most of 1 and 2. So a lot of it will be accounted for because these are some large expenses here for the next 2 years. But yes, anything that is not expended, we see it can work through in a similar way it's going to work through this year in terms of any return to the town.
Committee members, any questions? Yes, Tom, you're on mute.
My question is on the item that Greg was just discussing. At the bottom of that sheet, it lists IT, custodial, and police support. My question is on the IT piece of that, you mentioned earlier that there were 400 new Chromebooks for students and 150 teacher PCs that are necessary. Is that an expense that you hope to use that fund for?
So that expense actually has already been spent. We have the 400 Chromebooks and we have the 150 teacher laptop replacements. That was placed on ESSER 1, I believe.
So there is no other plan to use the monies for IT?
No, actually, that's why we have it down there, because we want to continue to plan with the IT department and look at how are we set for instruction in the classroom, because we're still utilizing projectors and computers and so forth, and we're still a one-to-one district. So we want to make sure now that we're not in a situation where we were last August, where we're trying to find and make sure that we have all students outfitted. We want to make sure that we now go through the renewal, which did not happen last year, and make sure that our students who say are on their have a computer that's in its 5th year is getting renewed with one of those newer computers. I'm sorry? Yeah. The other thing, sorry, Pam was reminding me and Sarah was reminding me that both in January, when we looked at our Wi-Fi network, we knew we had to add Wi-Fi access points to Meadowbrook. This summer, we're going to use ESSER 2, to make sure that all buildings have Wi-Fi access points that are working, and if we need to add more, we can do that. Okay, and Pam's letting me know that Mr. Quimby just brought down that purchase order and it's $219,000. So that will go on ESSER 2.
Questions, I think these question number 4 and 5 are pretty much related. Questions by committee members as a follow-up. Okay. All right. Thank you. I guess the only thing I'm a little still unclear of is how the purchase of the technology equipment relates to the capital plan for technology and, the parts that support the school system. But I think that can probably get clarified somehow, not
Sure.
necessarily.
I mean, I think Mr. Quimby can clarify that probably better than I can, but what I can say is we always work together. We knew that in the capital budget, we had a certain amount of money that was, I believe, approved in July for computer renewal. I don't believe, though, that money had been placed into an account yet. And so we needed to move and order computers to make sure that we were ready for remote learning. That was the 400 Chromebooks. And then as we were going into hybrid, we had to make sure that our staff computers could work and handle the live streaming to our home students and handle different things that were going on in the classroom.
All right. Thank you, Gordon.
Sure.
I would say we move on to number 6, and this is, and thank you for supplying the information on the enrollment.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of like there's not huge changes in enrollment, but just a slow, and it appears to be a steady, slow decline in the number of students that we've experienced, that we have. And if I understand the projection right, it basically continues on a very slow, almost insignificant, but if anything, it's down slightly as you project to 2030.
Sure. It's so compared to say 2019, it is a little bit of a decline. But then in the projection that NESDEC did for us, it kind of flattens out and stays right in that 2,400 range, whether it's 2,420 in the year 2024, or when they go out to 2030, it's 2,445. They're projecting that we're going to flatten out. So what they use, obviously, as you saw, some of it were the live births, but they also look at permits and what buildings going on in East Longmeadow. And so I'm hopeful that maybe we're not going to flatline, that we're going to start to move up. We have some new, I think 23 permits, active permits right now for building. Hoping for some families, bring them in.
Rich?
Question. I understand about the flatline, the population,
Mhm.
but from my historical perspective, could you comment on how our population is changing and in some way becoming a little more demanding than in the past?
Sure. So our demographics are changing as a town, or definitely as a student body. We're right now about 26% free and reduced lunch. We are becoming more diverse in terms of both socioeconomics, but also in terms of culture and background. When I first started in the district, we were probably somewhere around 88% white, and now we're 79% white, and we're seeing percentages of Asian students and Hispanic students and Black students increasing, which is fantastic. We're becoming a very diverse community, which in turn then attracts different families. We had a family move in last year, I believe, that came from Florida, working at Bay State as their diversity coordinator, 3 kids in the district. And so it's pretty neat to see people who are being transplanted for jobs that are choosing East Longmeadow. And so to your question, Mr. Ficero, yes, we are becoming more diverse. The demanding part, I think, is something that is not necessarily becoming because we're becoming more diverse, possibly in the socioeconomic part of that. But our special education right now is hovering right around 18%. Yes, last year, when we were talking about our out-of-district students, we did have some very severe cases where we have students who are residential, in a residential placement, basically 24/7. Oh yeah, I don't know if you can hear the chorus behind me, but we actually have singing going on, which is nice to hear.
Good for you.
I know.
One quick question on enrollment. Does the enrollment that was showing, does that include any school choice students? Or
It
is
would.
that exclusive of school choice?
No, it would include the school choice. So what the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education does is, as they collect the student information from our student information database, they're bringing in what they call the student ID or the SASIDs. And so those students who are coming in under choice, if they are on our roster, so to speak, October 1st, they're part of our enrollment number. They're also part of our Chapter 70 formula, and we obviously receive a certain amount of money for just being in the choice program as a student moves over.
All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Gordon on that item?
I'm gonna add one thing about
Yep, go
enrollment
ahead,
for
Sarah.
next year. I think that not just in East Long Meadow, but across the country and the Commonwealth, next year's enrollment is going to be an interesting indicator because we have a number of families based on decisions to have a remote only program who opted their children into different types of programming. So when you're thinking about next year's first grade, it's hard to think about that necessarily because kindergarten enrollment might have looked different because families were thinking about their child's first experience in school being remote only. When you're thinking about certain placements for kids who maybe receive special education services and not wanting that to occur potentially in a remote only setting. So there are students who may have opted out of enrolling back in East Long Meadow this academic year based on the pandemic and based on the option of remote only at the onset of this academic year. Whereas you think about next academic year and everything moving the way it is now, opening that is more similar to previous openings than last year, I think we might see a difference in what that enrollment projection looks like. I'm not saying it's going to be 1,000 students, but I think you might see something that's actually a little bit more in a positive setting because we had a number of students who went to private school, a number of students who went to parochial schools. So I think that there will be some interesting information that comes to light when we look at next year's enrollment.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just to add to that, you can, if you look at the kindergarten, historic kindergarten enrollment, in October and November, we were at 140. Generally, we are somewhere in the 160s, but you also see in some cases where we're up as high as say 189, 181. This year, just as Ms. Trulio was saying, there were families that opted not to put their children in kindergarten. We also went from roughly 15 to 20 homeschool students to now 63. So we think we're going to see those homeschooling students come back. We also had an increase of students transferring to a virtual school district that is recognized by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. I think we have 7 students now in that virtual school.
Thank you, Gordon. I guess a question that comes to mind is, in reading the materials, it looked like you formulated your budget based on the official enrollment projection for FY22.
Yes.
So the factors that Sarah and you just alluded to, are those incorporated in that, or is that, because I believe you also determines certain school choice slots on the idea that, those would be available without incremental costs to the schools. So
Correct.
Are you factoring in for these other homeschool or possibly, the alternatives that parents selected that may not select that same option for this coming year?
Yes, and we have it factored in. Right now, our kindergarten teachers, the staff we have, we can handle somewhere between that 160 and into the 180s. When you get a little bit above that, then obviously you're looking at very large kindergarten classes. But right now, we can handle that return. We can also handle the homeschooling return. And so that shouldn't be a problem. What we did with school choice is we looked at areas or grade levels that are somewhat lower in traditional enrollment numbers. And that's where we offer slots.
why don't we move on then? I thought for some reason I had in here a question about school choice and how it works, but maybe not. So maybe this is a good point.
I think you did. I think
Oh, I
it's,
did. All right.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then we'll move on. Question number 7 was basically, do you have contract negotiations that will be coming to fruition in FY22?
we're actually in a really good place with our teachers union. We're about to finalize our agreement, and we should be fine moving forward with the budget that we had proposed.
So yep, go ahead, Greg.
Oops, sorry, Greg.
So within our budget requests at level services, we do have an assumption for that Unit A contract. Since it's so large, certainly we wouldn't want to come back to the town necessarily later on. So that's reflected in that 2.78. Okay. And we believe that'll be sufficient.
All right. Thank you, Greg. Any other questions on that point from the committee members? Okay. So I think you sent us the information regarding the full-time equivalents.
Yes.
And,
Should have a chart breaking that down.
Does anyone have any questions on the change between, or the non-change for the most part, between FY21 and projected FY22? Okay, don't hear that.
We are open to adding positions if you would like.
Thank you. And so that basically brings us through the first set of questions regarding the education. I did list a one on the school committee stipend, which is a general fund expense. And first of all, the description didn't seem to go with the number, so it was a little confusing. But looking back, so the request is from 8,500 to 10,700, or basically a 26% increase. The description of how that's being spent, it seems to be an old description from a year or two ago. So it doesn't quite show us what your intention is for the 10.7. But I know that I think it was, well, yes, 2 years ago, there was an increase request. I think the final budget included a 25% increase, and then last year was flat.
That's correct, Jim.
Okay. So the request, I'm not aware of any other boards looking for an increase in their stipends. Is there a particular reason that you're looking for another 25% increase?
Did you want me to answer that, Greg? I think as the only other voted committee, they felt with all the work that they do, that they too deserved an increase. So it was increased in 2020, I believe, by $350 per person. And so we submitted again for the 18,000. That was the same exact amount, and I did cut and paste that. So you're absolutely right, Jim. Then the committee spoke with Mary McNally, and both in agreement that we reduced that to $10,700. So that's the chairperson would get the original amount, which they get now, of $2,100 plus $600. So that would make it $2,700. And the 4 members who currently get $1,600 would each get an additional $400, which would bring them to the $2,000. For a total of $8,000 for them. So when you add that up, the $2,700 plus the $8,000 is where the $10,700 comes from.
Thank you for that explanation, Pam.
Okay.
I can say that I do put them through a lot, so they're worth the increase.
You know, if you ever tried to figure out the hourly pay, it would just not work at all, regardless of what amount we put in there.
That's true.
Greg, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and you're right, it doesn't cover the gas to the meetings back and forth necessarily, but just going forward in the future, we want to encourage elected officials. I'm only here for a limited time, as is Sarah, but relative to the town council as an executive board in town, certainly we feel that there should be some monetary incentive for future candidates. You know, we're not trying to make a boatload of money out of this. That's not why any of us are doing it, but just in terms of attracting further candidates, I think it's important that it's at least close to the legislative body, if not the same or whatever it is. So, thank you.
Understood. So those are the advanced questions. I'm happy to open it up now to each of the committee members for questions that they have that we still need to address. Chris, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Do you have any in particular that you want to cover?
That I want to tell them or ask them. Let's see. With the grants, with the report, we saw the second quarter report. The grants that have balances in at the end of a fiscal year, can you carry those over if there's a remaining balance in the monies?
Yes. I'm sorry, I just want to be clear on what you're asking, Chris. So you looked at the second quarter. Are you referring to like sorry, I get a little protective, my grants. It's our grants, Title I, IDEA, those kind of grants. Is that what your question is?
I'll tell you in a moment.
I just want to be sure.
Yes.
Sorry.
Well, the federal grants, and I'm not even sure about the ESSER and the COVID relief funds. The
I'm
Title
sorry,
I.
I didn't know I had to turn it up. Sorry, Chris.
We have a total grants balance as of this time of $460,503. Now that goes back to December 31. I think one of our members, or there was one of the questions you're going to make available the third quarter report. Okay. I'm just wondering what happens to these balances, if they can still be expended for the purposes that they were issued.
Yes, they can, Chris. All grants can be rolled over into the next year. We typically do expend most of our funds. It's very seldom that we actually roll them over, but yes, I can assure you we can roll those over.
Okay, and I noticed I have a follow-up question, if it's okay, Jim.
Yep.
When you say encumbered, I've always understood encumbered to mean anticipated invoices, anticipated cost, but not anything greater than that. Your invoices would have to match what you're reserving. Is that the same case for the school encumbered amounts?
Yes, encumbrances are purchase orders that are already in place.
Okay.
Expenditures that it's just a matter of time when the services are, completed and or the supplies received, and then we pay the invoice.
All right. So another follow-up. You have total budget. You show a balance remaining both in salaries and in equipment and supplies and so forth. So you show the encumbered amount of $17,754,000, and I'm sure that's fluid. That has changed. But a balance of $2.4 million. If that is left at the end of the school year, as of June 30th, what transpires with that money?
Well, funds that are remaining at the end of the school year that are not expended would go back to the town's general fund.
They would.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that always happens with every school year. But of course, I just want to remind everyone that this second quarter was when our remote students, everybody was remote. So now that,
Right.
we kind of flipped this year. So last year it was a little bit different because our kids were in, then they were out. So we didn't expend as much at the end of the year or that last quarter that we typically do. But this year, kind of backwards. Now we have the kids in. We need things. So I just want to be clear on that second quarter.
Can I ask another follow-up?
Sure.
If you're anticipating expenditures, for instance, with the summer programs, would you use any balance remaining to fund that with the anticipation of being able to document it to get ESSER 3 monies?
So summer programs go into the next fiscal year, and actually that is part of the plan for the ESSER 2 grant. I believe it's about $100,000 that we're actually organizing right now. We're going to be talking about that on Monday night. Our curriculum director is going to talk about the summer programs that we're working on. Did I get that right, Gordon? Was there anything else with the summer
You
program?
wanna mute?
That sounds good. Thank you very much, Pam.
All right, thank you, Chris. Kathy, do you have any specific question?
It's a very minor question. What, Gordon, what is the dollar amount of reimbursement from the state for each student we take under school choice?
It's $5,000. Oops, Pam, your volume's up. Sorry, we're echoing.
I'm sorry.
Kathy, it's
Still 5,000?
yes, it's $5,000. However, something that I think is sometimes confused. First of all, I think you know, Kathy, school choice is a lottery draw. So we open up and people apply, and then literally we're drawing names. So, and you have to do it blindly. So I know that people get nervous about, oh my gosh, what if we have 10 students on IEPs? The state does provide more money for students who's, when we were talking earlier about when they pull our information, they're pulling our information from the student information system, and our students who are coded as students with IEPs, they actually get more money from the state. So that could be $7,000 or something of that nature.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, Kathy?
I'm good. It's familiar territory.
Tom, have anything you want to follow up? You're on mute.
I'm not sure if we're going to be heading down the capital project list later on, but is it okay to bring that up at this point?
I would, yes, because it wasn't my plan to actually go through all of the items with the school. So yes, bring it up. Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
In our discussions with the DPW last week, there was a mention that the Mountain View modulars were going to be replaced with permanent structures. And there's quite a few months of downtime. So my question is is there really a need for it this year? Since you've already accommodated the students moving out of those classrooms into other classrooms or working remotely. And during the build process, which will take place according to Bruce next year, it looks like there'll be approximately a 6-month period where the students will have to be housed in the school.
Okay.
So, I mean, it sounds like if there's an opportunity to reduce the cost of that, that's a big expense. It's $950,000 this year, and somehow defer some of that cost, if not all of it, until next year. I think that might help with the bottom line here.
So
Kathy, go ahead.
I'm just going to jump in because I was the one who asked Bruce about that lapse of time, and we will bond for any of these projects for July 1, but in a case with the modulars, the actual building piece wouldn't occur till the summer of 22. And my question was, what's the build out time? And other than July and August, how much of the school year might be impacted where you've got to look for housing those kids under the regular Mountain View building? And Bruce's answer was probably 4 months total. So I took that to mean, July and August, they're out and you wouldn't use that place to do summer school. So I took that answer to mean 2 months, maybe 3, because nothing ever, we've all built things and it never goes down to the exact date. What I didn't know, and I'll just guesstimate at, is how many kids are in those modulars, give or take. I think that would be better for the rest of the committee to understand how to place them while they're displaced.
Correct. So with the Mountain View modulars, they're used predominantly for related services and special education services. So you have smaller groups in them. Obviously, you need a quiet space and a space that's somewhat individual to deliver some of these services. What we would have to do when, and I think Bruce is probably going on the experience that we had with the Meadowbrook modular.
Yeah, he made that clear.
Yeah, so we would have to figure out how we provide those spaces for the small groups, which would probably mean that we would take a lot of our specials teachers and put them on carts and have them move into the regular classroom. Instead of having, say, art come to them, they will go and bring it to the homeroom classroom, which then would put classroom teachers into a different area, say, for preparation time and so forth.
Greg.
Yeah, and sorry, I just stepped out of the room, so I'm not sure how much Gordon got into detail, but we need every inch of that building. In every building we have, specifically at Mountain View, we have students learning on the stage. We have students learning in closets or good-sized closets. They're not necessarily closets anymore, but so the 6 month downtime is just inevitable. We're going to have downtime when we're building a new structure. It's going to go exactly where the old one is. So it'll be a huge inconvenience for those 6 months. As Gordon said, they'll have to go other places, but they'll literally be in halls, I'm sure of it, which is not a conducive place to live. So the sooner the better we can get that space. As you could maybe have seen, those Meadowbrook classrooms are phenomenal in terms of brightness of room, steadiness of heat, ventilation. It's really a good learning environment. And so at some point we're going to have that 6 month downtime, but the sooner the better for the students.
All right,
I'm actually moving my office to the Meadowbrook modulars, so they are very nice. We hope to see something similar at Mountain View.
Tom, other questions?
Oh,
No, I'm good now.
Okay. All right, our cleanup hitter. Rich, questions?
I'm going to echo Kathy. This is familiar territory, so I'm all set.
Okay. All right. Okay, so that leaves me. I did have 3 questions, 2 kind of specific and 1 general. So the school choice, we get $5,000 according to the budget hearing presentation materials. We spend $15,000. So stupid question. How does it add up?
So when you say we spend $15,000, you're talking about per pupil expenditure?
Right.
Okay. So the per pupil expenditure is a formula that the state has put together, and what it does basically, it pulls in costs for administration, for teachers, for school supplies. It looks at the entire budget and then obviously uses your enrollment to come up with a per pupil expenditure. What we're doing with school choice is we're trying to be incredibly planful so that we're looking at where we may have a grade level where enrollment is down. And therefore, at least this year, which was our first entrance back into it from probably 20 years ago, Kathy and Rich may know, it's been at least 15, if not more. We have not added staff, nor are we, say, using more utilities or supplies at this point. And so we don't want to get into a situation where some districts are, where you're relying on school choice, and so you keep expanding the numbers. We're looking to help our enrollment, but also increase diversity and pull communities together, really. If, there are, obviously we've talked at this time about residency issues, and how we investigate those, this is an opportunity for students in other communities to come into the East Long Meadow Public Schools.
So in essence, you don't anticipate any incremental costs to occur because of the way you've selected the slots that you're going to open up?
Right.
Okay.
Even if we had, say, a student with significant special education needs, first, you're going to get additional funding from the state for that. And then second, we would be able to claim, depending on how much that cost is, it'd have to be significant, but we could claim some of that cost in the circuit breaker. That's when you start getting in the neighborhood of, say, $47,000 and so forth. We haven't seen that with school choice, but there are mechanisms to help offset that.
A related question on school choice. Does the revenue that comes in from the state for that, does that go towards the general fund, or does it go to an account that stays under the control of the schools? How does that work?
So it comes into a revolving account, which means that it can carry over each year. And our thought process there was it's accumulating. It's not incredible amounts like when we were talking about what PPE may cost or counseling may cost. But as it accumulates, one of the things that I think the school committee would be seeking to do, it could be used as a way to offset some type of special education tuition, out-of-district tuition spike. Not currently where it's somewhere around $75,000. That actually is a close to a year tuition. So it wouldn't be a safeguard yet, but as that revolving fund accumulates, it could be that type of fund where it helps offset special education costs.
All right, thank you, Gordon. That was 1B of my first question. Sorry.
All right, 1B, nice. Back to the MCAS.
Yeah. Quick question on the paraprofessionals budget. It was an 8.74% increase, and the notation was contractual obligations.
Sure.
Was that an unusual?
It was a different way of negotiating. And one of the things that I think everyone who was involved in that, our school committee members and administrators and the paraprofessionals, we have a group that has been incredibly dedicated and is called upon to do many different things to support the instruction going on in the classroom. And they're paid an hourly wage that was, as the Massachusetts hourly wage increases towards $15 an hour, that, I'm sorry, minimum wage, that was getting awfully close. And so we wanted to make sure that, one, we showed that we value them. And so we were looking at percentages the way we might do with other contract negotiations. We actually went up in hourly dollar value. And so, yes, that contract was a pretty significant increase, but we felt it was necessary to support our paraprofessionals who are doing some incredible work.
Kathy?
I'd like to just add to what Gordon said. We're a district where our paraprofessionals, many of them are as equally credentialed as our classroom teachers.
Right.
And have come into the paraprofessional ranks many times because they were home, females I'm speaking, and they are predominantly females for the most part, home raising families and then re-entered the workforce. But we have, 100 paras in the district, Gordon, give or take?
98.
They're the unsung heroes because they still do teachers' work.
Right.
And
in some cases,
we're not able to pay them at a rate commensurate to. We are certainly in the financial world getting a heck of a return on our investment. Let me put it that way.
Right.
These are wonderful people who keep the classroom together.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy. So my third and final question is just as you fashion the budget and you look forward to FY22, what are the places, I guess, or the areas that you see the biggest chance to be squeezed, or where you have the most concern about the budget? Are there areas that, you know, you're saying to yourself, I got to better watch that one pretty closely, or just kind of interested in getting your thoughts as to, you know, are there places that you're thinking you're going to need to be more careful of, or you're concerned about your assumptions versus what might take place?
Sure. So I think one of the things that we've been starting to outline in ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 is, and I think Mrs. Trulio was also saying it, is that we're not sure what our students are going to be enduring in terms of social, emotional, and mental health challenges. What we do know is we're seeing a rise right now, and that may continue as we open schools for the next year, which is why we're looking at our grants to utilize a good portion of them around that. Secondly, and I think Mrs. Trulio also said this, we need to assess, and now that we're full in person, it will be a little bit easier to see where there might be learning gaps. And so we're not only going to be doing that at the end of the year for most of the grade levels with iReady, but we're also going to be running summer learning academies that will predominantly target ELA and math. And we hope that we're going to be doing that on all levels, elementary, middle, and high school. And so we hope that we will have families take us up on that. We're going to be combining, obviously, the academic work with a little bit more fun. It won't be necessarily traditional school, if you will, because we know that everybody needs a break and have some summertime. So I would say that right now, what we're worried about most is how we do those things and get our students back on track. And so it's hard to put a dollar value on that because this is all unknown territory.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Greg.
Just one other thing that I'd like us all to keep our eye on is our capital expenditures going forward. As you all know, our school buildings are aging. We have the high school now potentially starting to move forward with some sort of a project going forward. Our newest school is now 20 years old.
My baby is 20 years old.
Of the district, which was the stadium turf project, track and turf project, is already up for replacement of the track. So I just want to plug for some capital improvements for all our buildings. As we know, the buildings create the environment for learning, and a lot of them are wanting and moderately outdated. So just as we look forward, there will be some large expenditures coming up, but it directly relates to the quality of life here in East Long Meadow, the quality of education, and property value. Let's not be naive that good schools, nice schools attract new buyers to those houses that we all will eventually sell. So just to make that plug, not this year, not next year, but as we move forward, there'll be some need for some major investments in the schools. So, and I would say the things that we have done, the roofs, the windows, to some of the existing buildings have made a drastic difference, both in appearance and you know, how the classroom experience is. But again, there'll be some more to come. So,
Thank you, Greg. Rich.
Just a clarification, you mentioned, Greg, about the track being reinstalled. There was a question out there that the school is not using any of the revolving account. Is that true? Do we not set aside revolving account funds to help fund that track reinstallment?
We did. It's a combination of money coming from the stadium rental account and money coming from community preservation.
Okay, so the rental account is being used to help that track cost.
I believe Mrs. Blair just said 27,000 is going toward the resurfacing.
I'm not positive on that amount, but I think that's it.
Thank you.
Any final questions from the committee members for the representatives of the school and school committee? All right. Any questions, Mary and Steve? You've listened in very patiently. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
No, all good here.
All right. Thank you. Greg, Gordon, Pam, Sarah, any final comments you want to make before we?
I just have one more comment. I just want to, I don't think we can underscore enough that the unknown around what our students are going to need is a very real reality. And when we think about your last question regarding like, where do we see potential constraints on our budget? And I just think we need to be really clear, like education changes yearly. It's a profession. So there are best practices that evolve. There's research, to Rich's point earlier around high quality curricula. And we have to be able to adapt to that. And that means not only what Greg mentioned regarding facilities, but it also means ensuring that we're responsive to the ever-changing needs of our students. So the impact this pandemic had isn't going to be shirred up and have a bow on it by the end of next academic year. Our kindergartners are our future 10th graders. They are our future graduates. We need to ensure that the impacts that they felt this academic year, the 6th graders, the 4th graders, that we are responsive to them, not just in the here and now, but for the long term. And I think that that's going to be a continual conversation that we're going to have to revisit, and we're going to have to ensure that we're providing the services that the kids need, because we don't know exactly yet what long-term impacts this has had in terms of academic loss of services along the way by pushing us to be isolated for times and not receiving all the necessary services our kids needed. So I just think this is an evolving situation, and the more we can collaborate and be flexible around what the needs of kids are and ensure that we're putting those first, then the better our budget will be able to respond. And I think that this is a great example of how we can talk through it, but knowing that the priority I know of Greg and myself and of the entire committee is meeting needs of kids. And we've got to make sure that we keep that at the forefront as we think about this budget, but forward budgets as they come.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else, any final comments? Then what I'll just mention to you where we are in our process. This is our final information gathering meeting. And as you know, we have to make our recommendations to the town council on the town manager's budget in order for them to vote on their budget by June 1st. So next week, we plan to have 2 meetings. We'll be meeting on Wednesday, May 12th, and that's where we'll be kind of going through everything that we've listened to and vote on what our recommendations will be. If we haven't finished by Wednesday, we have a meeting scheduled for Thursday to finish up, but that's kind of where we are. And after that, we would be planning to put those into a form of communication that we could communicate to the town council. So that's our time frame. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But I will say thank you for all the time that you've invested to kind of walk through the budget with us. And we'll be working on all of those items. So thank you very much. And we'll be in communication, I'm sure.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Thanks. Thank you. We're going to continue our meeting for a moment. So Don, you can let the school, Pam and Gordon and Sarah off the hook. And thank you again. Bye-bye. Well, thank you, everyone. So the reason I wanted to make sure we had just a couple of minutes is
We lost Tom Connor.
Oh,
Where'd Tom go?
Don, you didn't have no like fat finger and.
I don't believe I did, but
Left him right out the door.
anything's possible. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
I can bring him in. Here he is.
Where'd you go, Tom?
You're on mute. Take it off.
I went into outer space.
I feel like I go there quite frequently these days.
I could hear everyone talk, but I was not on the screen.
Any particular comments or questions immediately regarding that? I know we're getting close to our 3 o'clock. I did want to say that next week, as I mentioned, is our 2-day event where we go through our decisions and make our recommendations. Chris Saulnier had suggested that we might want to consider trying to do this in person. And I want to get a consensus if people would prefer to do that. I know Rich is saying yes.
Absolutely.
Kathy, Tom, how do you feel?
Yes.
Kathy's
I'm
not
good with it.
pleased.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I have inquired with Jackie Sullivan to check with that. And she's also checking on it. Well, I know Mary's looking into a possible spot for us. Is that correct, Mary? And I got you on mute.
Yeah, Jackie sent your email to me because she wanted to make sure I was approving of in-person meetings, which I am. But then when I check with Dawn, if Steve and I are going to be attendees in the Zoom audience, it was going to present some difficulty for Dawn to do the Zoom function as well as the in-person meeting at the COA. So he suggested as an alternative that he could do it in the school superintendent's conference room. So if you're good with that, I can let Jackie know and she can post it with the location and so forth.
So is everyone good with that being for Wednesday and Thursday, Chris?
Well, I was going to say, if it's more convenient for everybody to do Zoom from their home, that's fine. With me, it was just a suggestion. But what I would like to stipulate, and I would hope you would agree, that post these as a working session, so we do not get input from other people that might want to join the Zoom meeting.
So tell me about that nuance. I'm not familiar with that. Yes.
I might be able to shed some light on it. If we post that and that we're physically present, I don't think we can, under open meeting law, exclude people who physically want to be in the audience.
Oh, they can certainly be in the audience, Kathy. They
But
just,
in the Zoom, they can be in the audience, but they don't have to be pulled in.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
and that would be true of an in-person.
Right.
It's always up to the chairman who gets to speak. So,
Well, it'll be a little more tricky in person because I won't have the screen to do that, I suppose. But as long as we can figure out a way, that would be fine.
well, you will have a display so that you will see on one big TV screen in that room what you see now
All right. Okay.
for the remote participants.
And just to let you know, Mary and Steve will be participating in the as not panelists, but as participants, attendees, and in the event, and they'll be listening in. If we need to check with them, which I suspect we will, we'll ask Don to pull them in as panelists to go through whatever it is we need to go through. But for the rest of the meeting, they won't necessarily show on the camera, and they won't be active participants in the meeting, but they'll be there listening in and available for us to call upon their expertise if we need it as we go through our deliberation process. Any other questions?
Jim, I had a,
go ahead, Mary. Yeah.
oh, if you have the opportunity to prepare, or if you think you know where the questions may come to both Steve and to me, it would be extraordinarily helpful if we knew those in advance. Only because I don't want to leave your committee with no answer if I'm not prepared on a particular, if it requires research of some sort or whatever. I mean, it's a thought. I'm just, I don't want to say, gee, I don't know, I'll get back to you, but I mean,
I don't have an idea specifically. My guess is there may, we'll obviously be talking about the new positions. And so there may be some questions that may arise where we're clarifying how those will work. That's the police, the fire, Steve's position and your position. The others, I mean, unless someone knows right now that there's something we're gonna necessarily specifically look for Steve or Mary to answer. My suspicion would be if there are going to be questions, it may be around those positions, but, and there might be some questions about other things. If I can think of them, Mary, I'll send you something in advance. And if committee members, you have anything that comes up, please forward it to me and I'll add that to them. Good question. I'm not sure I have a good answer for you.
Well, the only other issue would be if you think you're going to spend time on the capital budget, I'd like to let Ryan know that he should hang around, and Bruce as well. Just because they have the weed level on those. I mean, I think Steve and I have a pretty good handle on it, but I'd like to be as thorough as possible when you.
Well, and there may be that. We haven't actually discussed those, and we haven't determined where we might have questions regarding the current recommendation. So that's I'm glad you raised that, because we may indeed need to ask a question while we're trying to determine our recommendation. Other things. Don, you had something you wanted to bring up, or did we already cover it?
No, I think we covered it. So that the room is available for both days and it's tentatively booked. Kara raised one concern just about the spacing and the number of people, but since Steve and Mary will both be remote anyway, you won't have any more than with the first school committee meeting. There's just a limitation with the spacing still in the room. And I will say, for what it's worth, up until, I don't know what, so the date will be when?
Wednesday.
So those meetings are still
May 12th, excuse me.
May 12th, yeah. So I believe that in the protocols, the state dictates the protocols now that you would be masked in that room.
Masked as well as socially distanced?
Yes, sir.
Just I'm putting that out there because it may weigh into your decision what to do.
Well, it is a requirement.
So
does that change anybody's thoughts? Yes, it does, Chris.
It changes mine.
All right. Anyone else? Yeah.
I just have a clarification, Don, you'll be able to answer this best. I believe the school committee has gone back to in the building.
yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. So we have, they're 5 members in the room during the school committee meetings. They're all masked. But I'm operating the camera and showing that full room and recording the audio through, the usual way we used to do at the council meetings. But then my feed is going out over Zoom, and we have a display that's able to bring the remote participants in so that they can see them on a screen. So it's a kind of a hybrid model.
And
it requires a fair amount of setup, which is why for me I don't have a way to get that big TV that I use over to the COA. It's just, it's a little bit too complicated at this point.
So just to continue that question, that thinking, when a school committee member wants to speak, can they take the mask off, or
They have not been taking their masks
Okay.
off at all during the meetings.
Thank you.
So I can't say that's that appealing to me.
I would agree on that note then.
All right. Is it a consensus? What about you, Rich?
Someone who works with a mask, it's really draining. It really is. For us to speak for an hour and a half through a mask, it gets to you after a while. It really does.
All right. So do we drop that? It was a good idea.
Yeah, oh, I love the idea.
With those kind of restrictions, we go back to Zoom?
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Okay. Well, that simplifies things. Sorry about having it, but I guess we had that. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you, John, for bringing that
I
up.
did. It is it's out there. So sorry to be the wet blanket, but.
Chris?
Yeah, well then, how are we going to approach our deliberations? Are we going, just so we can have our paperwork organized, since we're not all going to be together? are you going to start right from point one? Are you going to go through sources and uses, or are you going to go through departments and then we'll vote on each department? Then we'll go through the capital projects and vote on each capital project?
I think that it probably makes sense to just go through the sources and uses. I don't know that we're going to have a lot of discussion about it, but just in case there is, we just go through that, get us to the departments, and go through where we note any questions. And perhaps that's what we do. We just go through every item. The ones that we have no questions on, we just note the ones that we have questions on, and we come back and discuss those. I think probably the capital plan probably makes sense to do it the same way, as just go through it and indicate if a member has a question on one of the recommendations, raise it, and we'll kind of reminds me of the way we used to do the town meeting budget line items, but then we go back and we'll discuss those until we've reached a decision. I think that, and what I'll try to do is, if it's possible, I'll have the form formatted with our columns, so that when we are looking at it, we can note what we may or may not, recommend differently than the current budget. Does that make sense for everybody? I mean, we still may not get through all the discussions we're going to have, but all right, okay.
Yeah. Good.
Thank you, Chris. Other things we should bring up today? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Chris, do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, any other discussion? Before we go on, I just want to say thank you all, and thank you for sitting in and listening in on all of these sessions, and look forward to our deliberations next week. So roll call vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Jim? Yes. All right, we're adjourned. And thank you, Mary and Steve, for your help as always.